All right, joining me live is the Shadow Immigration Minister Dan Tehan. Thanks for your time, Dan Tehan. Let's start on election timing. Do you expect the government to want to deliver another budget in March, or do you think they'll go earlier than full term?
Well, I think the worry is, Andrew, that what the Prime Minister will do will be in his own interests, and he will seek to try and exploit the day he goes rather than being focused on delivering for the Australian people. And what we want to hear from the Prime Minister is not about election timing, but what he's doing to fix cost of living, what he's doing to fix the cost of doing business. We've had these numbers out. 11,000 businesses went into insolvency in the 23-24 period. That's a record. That's what everyone wants the PM focused on, yet he seems to be focused on everything else. And now it seems to be, his plans for when he's going to hold the election and whether we will or won't have a budget. That's not what the Australian people are looking for at the moment.
So you think he should you think he should guarantee, you think he should announce an election date now, do you? That's what Julia Gillard did. Didn't work out well for her. Do you think he should basically say that? So we're definitely doing the budget March 25?
Well, why did he put the parliamentary calendar out now? It normally comes out late November, early December. He's done it to run this speculation. He knows he's got serious internal issues on his side. He knows that his backbench is starting to get very unhappy with the way he's communicating. We've got the anniversary of The Voice. They look back at that and say what a wasted year that was. Their constituents are saying to them, please do something about cost of living, about the cost of business. And all he's looking to do is provide these distractions, and this parliamentary calendar and distraction now about when you may or may not have an election is not what the Australian people want the Prime Minister focused on.
All right, well, he says big second-term agenda, childcare, Medicare, education, early childhood education, I think you can read in that, future made in Australia. What's wrong with all that?
Well, what's wrong with that is unless you've got a strong economy, unless you've got business working well, unless you've got them employing people, unless you've got people being able to afford their groceries at the supermarket, being able to pay their insurance, that's all very well, but you actually need a strong economy to be able to provide those things, and he doesn't seem to want to focus on that. As I said before, 11,000 businesses went into insolvency in the 23-24 period. There seems to be nothing about helping small business whatsoever as part of his agenda, and there's nothing dealing with the number one issue, cost of living, and driving inflation down. He just seems to think that isn't relevant to the agenda, yet it is the number one thing which is hurting the Australian people.
The focus will turn a lot more in the next 6 months to opposition policy, as you know. In your immigration space, we've seen the government fail to hit its targets. But what measures will you introduce to hit a net migration target that Peter Dutton has spoken about of 160,000 a year, about half what it is now? Who will you exclude from net migration and permanent migration to hit the promises that Mr Dutton has made?
Well, we'll outline all that in our policy in the lead up to the election. At the moment, what we're focused on, though, is that the government's absolute failure to be able to rein in immigration at the moment. Over 1 million people in a 2-year period during a housing crisis, during a rental crisis, and we know that their net overseas migration target of 395,000 for the last financial year isn't going to be met.
All right.
So we're trying to help and support the government dealing.
Let me just pull you up on that, though, because I did ask about your approach. 190,000 to 140,000 a year permanent migration, and as you just said, 395,000 net migration down to 160. That's going to require some drastic change, isn't it? Will we see less family reunion migration under a coalition government? Will we see less skilled migration, but you'll be looking for skills in certain areas like construction? Will we see even tighter caps on foreign students in your policy?
Well, we'll set all that out, but Andrew, you've got to remember we don't know what we'll be dealing with. So, for instance, we've been trying to work with the government about putting student caps in place. Now, that legislation, they wouldn't even bring it in for a vote in the Senate last week, and that would make a big start in properly regulating when it comes to international students, who's coming into the country, and in particular, and this is where the government has really failed with their focus, who is leaving the country. You know, the idea about temporary migration is that students come in and then they leave. Some highly skilled students you would want to make sure that you can keep to grow your economy and to grow your nation. So we will work through all this, but the trouble is Labor have made such a mess of immigration. We don't know where we'll be starting from at this stage. So we will detail our policies. We've already detailed some of them, and we will continue to detail those going forward in the lead up to
just
the
briefly,
next election.
do you have
such a mess of it?
Dan Tehan, do you have in your mind now a family reunion number, a skilled number? You've obviously announced a humanitarian number for your migration program that you want.
Well, we can't at the moment, Andrew, because we don't know how big the mess is going to be that we're going to.
But you've announced a global number.
We've got a good sense of that.
You've announced a global number, so you must have some idea, don't you?
Well, we have announced a global number. We're doing the work. What the most important thing is that you're doing the work on what are the policies which will enable you to achieve that. And what we've got to do is make sure, for instance, at the moment, we're seeing a lot of people, an increasing number of people, claiming asylum. So one of the things, for instance, that the government announced through Christine Nixon's policy review is some ways to deal with that. Now, we've said we support those, yet the government hasn't implemented. So we will outline clear policies which will enable us to get where we need to get to.
So you'd like to deport. Dan Tehan, you'd like to deport more people who are claiming asylum. Is that right?
But what we want to do is actually put stricter guidelines in place which would prevent it or make it harder for people to be able to claim asylum, because you've got to remember, Andrew, over 80% of the people that do it are found not to be owed protection. Now, you can put in place processes. For instance, the Christine Nixon review said you could look at using lawyers, so you would have to do your claims through lawyers. So that way the lawyers would then be able to say to the applicant, sorry, this doesn't add up, you shouldn't apply for it. So there are simple things you could do here which the government just aren't doing.
I've got to move on.
They've made such a mess of immigration.
Got to move on, Dan Tehan.